All right, and then I'm going to put up again for anyone who watches this back on YouTube. If you do want the 5 lessons, that's where you can go to snatch them for free. Now I am going to start a little bit back. So the part of this is something I already did on the prior stream, but I think for context, it'll be helpful to have this because it transitions into the part we're starting at today. Let me now retell and emphasize an experience of mine printed by me 2 years ago under the title The Search. I think it will help you to understand. That's a book. That's one of his books. You can go up and read it, the version he wrote of it in there if you want. I think it will help you understand this law of consciousness and show that you have no one to change but self, for you are incapable of seeing other than the contents of your own consciousness. Once in an idle interval at sea, I meditated on the perfect state and wondered what I would be were I of too pure eyes to behold iniquity, if to me all things were pure, and were I without condemnation. As I became lost in this fiery brooding, I found myself lifted above the dark environment of the senses. So intense was the feeling I felt myself, a being of fire, dwelling in a body of air. Voices as from a heavenly chorus, with the exaltation of those who had been conquerors in a conflict with death, were singing, "He is risen, he is risen." And intuitively I knew they meant me. Then I seemed to be walking in the night. I soon came upon a scene that might have been the ancient pool of Bethesda. For in this place lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, waiting not for the moving of the water as of tradition, but waiting for me. This is where people would go to get a miraculous healing. As I came near, without thought or effort on my part, they were one after the other molded as by the magician of the beautiful. Eyes, hand, feet, all missing members were drawn from some invisible reservoir and molded in harmony with that perfection which I felt springing within me. When all were made perfect, the chorus exulted, "It is finished." I know this vision was the result of my intense meditation upon the idea of perfection, for my meditations invariably bring about union with the state contemplated. I had been so completely absorbed within the idea that for a while I had become what I contemplated, and the high purpose with which I had for that moment identified myself, drew the companionship of high things, and fashioned the vision in harmony with my inner nature. The ideal with which we are united works by association of ideas to awaken 1,000 moods to create a drama in keeping with the central idea. Now, what I was just talking about, where your negative thoughts are a product of your state, this is how Neville is telling you this in a much more eloquent language. The ideal with which we are united, and depression is an ideal, works by association of ideas to awaken 1,000 moods to create a drama in keeping with the central idea. So this also explains why sometimes you have manifestations that you didn't specifically imagine. So if you are someone who is in a state of things never work out for me, and I can never get ahead. Let's make it really specific to money. I can never get ahead in terms of money. So you didn't specifically imagine for your car breaking down and now you have a huge bill the only month you've had some extra money to sock away. This is something that's coming from that central state. You have this state of I can never get ahead. And so when you do get ahead, something has to happen to keep in line with that state. Now, to go with a somewhat opposite positive towards that, you could say, like, random money always comes to me. Like, I'm always encountering more money in ways that I never imagined for. You could say, like, I'm always getting surprise money in ways I never imagined for. And, have an experience where literally people you haven't talked to in years send you checks, or you get a piece of mail saying that, oh, you actually had a refund we never sent you, or a place you worked 10 years ago sends you a paycheck you thought you were like, I didn't know I still had needed, had money from these people, or lets you know that you actually had a retirement account with them, and you go to check it and it's gained all this interest in the meanwhile. So you never specifically imagined that this place where you worked actually had a retirement account for you and it's earned all this interest. But now they're sending you the packet, and yeah, it's your account, and yeah, the money's in it. But so these are things that are a product of the state, which is really what the power of identifying with a really great state is. Because once you're in that state, you'll just automatically have all these really great manifestations that you didn't have to spend any amount of time or mental effort in moving into them. None at all. Like, it's just you effortlessly walk into a so much better life experience. My mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no way to bring about the perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. As soon as we succeed in transforming ourselves, the world will melt magically before our eyes and reshape itself in harmony with that which our transformation affirms. We've fashioned the world that surrounds us by the intensity of our imagination and feeling, and we illuminate or darken our lives by the concepts we hold of ourselves. Nothing is more important to us than our conception of ourselves, and especially is true of our concept of the deep, dimensionally greater one within us. What he's talking about there is your imagination. The way you think and feel about your imaginative power is really, truly the most important. So if you are imagining for something you really want, but all the time you're thinking, truly your dominant feeling is, I don't know if this is going to work. I really don't believe in this shit, but let me try it anyway. You can certainly indefinitely experience imagining it and not getting it. Or to make it specific, if you're imagining for it, but throughout the day you just really feel that you don't have it and you're never going to get it, that really is your dominant feeling, and that's what's going to express. But primarily what he's talking about here is, how do you think about imagination? Do you think imagination is God? Do you really truly believe that this is the one power and that it will absolutely do whatever you decide that you're going to do with it? And then what is your sort of current concept about how successful you are with imagining? I have to deal with this and confront this when it comes to revision. And I just wrote down the scene that I'm going to do, because my experience has been that revision works short term, and then not absolutely, which I don't like. But then for deeper past things, I don't really see any effect. And I would like to have that be in place. I would like to have deeper revisions have a noticeable and dramatic effect. And then I would also, and this is something that Neville really, in all the lectures I've read, hasn't addressed appropriately, I would also like revisions to automatically delete the original memory, or so deeply disentangle myself from it that it feels like I didn't experience it, which I fully know is possible. But basically, I want revision to be useful in forgetting, which ultimately is what you're trying to do with revision anyway. You're trying to basically delete something from your body of belief. Those that help or hinder us, whether they know it or not, are the servants of that law which shapes outward circumstances in harmony with our inner nature. It is our conception of ourselves which frees us or constrains us, though it may use material agencies to achieve its purpose. Because life molds the outer world to reflect the inner arrangement of our minds, there is no way of bringing about, just making sure it looks right, there's no way of bringing about the outer perfection we seek, other than by the transformation of ourselves. No help cometh from without. The hills to which we lift our eyes are those of an inner range. It is thus to our own consciousness that we must turn as to the only reality, the only foundation on which all phenomena can be explained. We can rely absolutely on the justice of this law to give us only that which is of the nature of ourselves. To attempt to change the world before we change our concept of ourselves is to struggle against the nature of things. There can be no outer change until there is first an inner change, as within, so without. And actually, the guy who I talked about today, who inspired me to do the negative thinking one, Nicholas of Upgrade to Life, check out his videos. He experienced this related to business success. Go look. I'm sure it's. I forget the title of it, but I'm sure it's titled correctly, where you would be like, yeah, that's the one. Something like his experience in manifesting or something like that. But basically, he had a self concept of, just of not succeeding, and that showed in his early business endeavors. And once he adjusted that, he achieved the success he has now. But the idea there is, had he or anyone else in a similar mindset persisted in, well, I'm going to try my hardest, but this is probably not going to work out, they could go through 20 businesses and have all the knowledge, all the connections that they need to create a successful business. But because they are so convinced that this will not succeed, it cannot succeed. But as soon as they step into truly, I am a success, their business must reflect that. I am not advocating philosophical indifference when I suggest that we should imagine ourselves as already that which we want to be, living in a mental atmosphere of greatness, rather than using physical means and arguments to bring about the desired changes. So he's saying you should still be taking actions, but they're not going to matter unless you've adjusted your sense of self. Everything we do, unaccompanied by a change of consciousness, is but futile readjustment of surfaces. However we toil or struggle, we can receive no more than our concepts of self affirm. To protest against anything which happens to us is to protest against the law of our being and our rulership over our own destiny. The circumstances of my life are too closely related to my conception of myself not to have been formed by my own spirit from some dimensionally larger storehouse of my being. If there is pain to me in these happenings, I should look within myself for the cause, for I am moved here and there and made to live in a world in harmony with my concept of myself. In other words, your circumstances are always going to reflect your self-concept. Now, there is this idea, and I would like to see... Now, Neville talks about when you're so thoroughly identified with the state. And he talked about it just here, that he said the world melts to confirm, this new state that you're in. Well, there's this idea in the manifested community that some of your circumstances are the result of your prior imaginal acts of states you had been in. And Neville talks about this too, where even once you've moved into a new state, you may see reverberations of your old state. But when that's happening, it's your reaction will tell you what state you're really in. And I know I've told that example many times of the lady who had really, truly moved into a new state on something, and she didn't disclose what it was, possibly not even to Neville, and he didn't disclose what it was, but her experience was that an acquaintance of hers wrote her a letter and brought up that this thing was still an issue. And when she saw the letter, she just felt like, well, I know that's not an issue anymore. So the fact that this lady even brought it up is just confirmation that this is not an issue for me anymore. So her reaction told her she was in this new state. If she had seen that and felt really slighted by it and really hurt or been defensive, like, well, I don't really think that's a big deal. But instead she saw it as, no, I know that's not a problem. I know I don't do that anymore. I don't know why you think I do that anymore, other than you're telling me that I don't do that anymore. That's not an issue for me anymore. As you notice the subtle responses you have in conversations with other people, when these things come up, you will see what that feels like. I notice it quite a lot when it comes to like general world views. Like when people have like really, really crappy limiting worldviews, and they just kind of throw them out there like they're truth. And now I'm almost like, I either have to restrain laughing. Sometimes, depending on the relationship, I tell them that you need to get rid of that. That's so stupid. That is such a bad belief. And then other times I'm excited because I'm like, oh, this is something I used to think, and now I know it's bullshit, and I don't think that anymore. And you just kind of have like a feeling of like true joy because you're like, that's not going to create in my world anymore. I don't have to live that way anymore. I have to put up with that. I don't have to put up with that crap anymore. And then other times it's just kind of funny because you're like, oh, either it's something you did or something you know someone used to do, like this was the thought that was creating in their world, and now you can see how it did that. And just, I don't know, it's one of these things where the more you pay attention, the more you recognize these things, the more you're going to move into like a feeling of joy when you recognize those. It's a unique experience, and people who've been manifesting for a while know exactly what I'm talking about. If we would become as emotionally aroused over our ideals is what it should be. If we would become as emotionally aroused over our ideals as we become over our dislikes, we would ascend to the plane of our ideal as easily as we now descend to the level of our hates. Love and hate have a magical transforming power, and we grow through their exercise into the likeness of what we contemplate. By intensity of hatred, we create in ourselves the character we imagine in our enemies. Qualities die for want of attention, so the unlovely states might best be rubbed out by imagining beauty for joy, beauty for ashes, and joy for mourning, rather than by direct attacks on the state from which we would be free. That is a Blake quote right there. Hold on just a second, I need to check something. Okay, let me just reread that. Love and hate have a magical transforming power, and we grow through their exercise into the likeness of what we contemplate. By intensity of hatred, we create in ourselves the character we imagine in our enemies. Qualities die for want of attention, so the unlovely states might best be rubbed out by imagining beauty for ashes and joy for mourning, rather than by direct attacks on the state from which we would be free. So he's really talking about revision there. This sentence, by the intensity of hatred, we create ourselves the character we imagine our enemies. That is super similar to a Joseph Murphy concept that I encountered the other day when I was listening back to one of his books. He used an example of I think it was a guy who was in real estate or some other direct sales type business, and he was like angry jealous of either his colleagues or competitors. And Joseph Murphy told him that and this guy hadn't sold a house in like 8 months. I'm pretty sure it was a real estate guy. And Joseph Murphy told him it was because of his really intense destructive anger and envy he had towards these guys that was causing that. You know, he basically advised him, you should be happy for everyone's success, and then that brings about your success. Now, this is one of these things where the Elohim implications get very interesting, and I do think you can tweak them. So I don't think you're necessarily bound to that. Though, really, for the most part, why wouldn't you want to live in a world where everybody's doing great? Like, isn't that the biggest part of what heaven really is? So, but at the same time, it can get a little bit moralistic. But just my point is, it's not a total mirror effect. But all thoughts are creative. So spending a lot of time mentally hitting another person is probably the worst use of your time. I want to say this last sentence again. Qualities die for want of attention. So the unlovely states might best be rubbed out by imagining beauty for ashes and joy for mourning, rather than by direct attacks on the state from which we would be free. So if I were to unpack that, I would say that he's telling you not to unpack the unlovely or awful, crappy, just downright terrible thing that you're looking to confront, but simply to put your focus on what is far, far better. And if it's something where, even like if it's a relationship where the person did something just so really, truly horrible to you that you can't imagine lovingly for them at all, or especially not your relationship with them, perhaps what might be better to do is simply to focus on, a feeling of being loved and supported, super generally, not even having the person in mind, and then once you could do that with that person if you wanted. You could use what Joseph Murphy calls the absolutist method, where you would just focus on the divine ideal of a thing. So you could pick an idea like love, focus on the most absolute best aspects of love, and then once you're totally lost in that feeling, just enjoying that feeling of pure, divine, unconditional love, you would just bring that person to mind and put all of those aspects onto them. Not just in terms of you feeling it towards them, but them embodying those qualities. Them being this unconditionally, purely loving being. Okay? But that's one of these things where you need to pay attention to yourself and know how far along you are mentally. And then how much of this do you need to really spend time on? Because if it's something where it's like, look, this is going to affect you for like 2 to 6 months, and then you're really not going to think about it again, you probably don't need to imagine very much for it, but you might want to say, well, has this in any way affected my self-concept? Is this something that's being created in my life because of a larger mindset I have that's creating situations like these? Like to make that more concrete, if you have a belief in things can just accidentally happen to you to screw up your life, when your most recent accident happens, it might be valuable to revise the accident, but it might also be way more valuable for you to just now decide that accidents don't happen to me. Like, everything in my life is joyous. Like, having my life suddenly interrupted by some horrible accident, not my story at all. I've never experienced anything like that. And to focus on a feeling of always feeling safe, always knowing things are going to work out. Things just magically work out for me. Having focus on that would be much better than trying to fix the most recent accident. Whatsoever things are lovely and of good report, think on these things, for we become that with which we are in rapport. There is nothing to change but our concept of self. As soon as we succeed in transforming self, our world will dissolve and reshape itself in harmony with that which our change affirms. So as I was talking about earlier, when Neville was talking about how quickly things can move, he's saying it's as soon as you transform the self. I, by descendant consciousness, have brought about the imperfection that I see. In the divine economy, nothing is lost. We cannot lose anything, save by descent in consciousness from the sphere where that thing has its natural life. And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was. In other words, prior to being human, you were pure imagination, and in that state, all things exist. And so you're saying to yourself, whatever this thing is you want now, bring it back. He's kind of moved directly into loss from this concept of love versus hate. As I ascend in consciousness, the power and glory that was mine return to me. And I too will say, I have finished the work thou gavest me to do. The work is to return from my descent in consciousness, from the level wherein I believed I was the son of a man, to the sphere where I know that I am one with my Father, and my Father is God. He's talking about here the arc that you've planned for yourself. And part of that arc is the promise, which is a series of visions. But then there's a pattern in terms of the more manifestations you have, the way you think about yourself, the way you think about this reality. Those changes in thought are also reflecting this ascent in consciousness. And what I was just talking about with my necklace, that's one way I experienced it, okay? Your way might be totally different. Well, it certainly will be different, but it might be really totally different. I know beyond all doubt that there is nothing for man to do but to change his own concept of himself, to assume greatness and sustain this assumption. If we walk as though we were already the ideal we serve, we will rise to the level of our assumption and find a world in harmony with our assumption. We will not have to lift a finger to make it so, for it is already so. It was always so. You and I have descended in consciousness to the level where we now find ourselves, and we see imperfection because we have descended. When we begin to ascend while here in this three-dimensional world, we find that we move in an entirely different environment. We have entirely different circles of friends, an entirely different world while still living here. We know the great mystery of the statement, I am in the world but not of it. Instead of changing things, I would suggest to all to identify themselves with the ideal they contemplate. What would the feeling be like were you of too pure eyes to behold iniquity, if to you all things were pure, and you were without condemnation? Contemplate the ideal state, and identify yourself with it, and you will ascend to the sphere where you, as Christ, have your natural life. You are still in that state where you were before the world was. The only thing that has fallen is your concept of self. I'm seeing this in a different way than I did when I first read this 2 years ago now. In other words, you actually are still unified with imagination. The only change has been how you think about yourself. You've limited yourself to a conception of being this one person, and having these certain experiences, and having these problems, and having these limitations. But that's not true. That's just something you imagined. You see the broken parts, which really are not broken. You are seeing them through distorted eyes, as though you are in one of those peculiar amusement galleries where a man walks before a mirror and he is elongated, yet he is the same man. Or he looks into another mirror and he's all big and fat. These things are seen today because man is what he is. Toy with the idea of perfection. Ask no man to help you, but let the prayer of the 17th chapter of the Gospel of St. John be your prayer. Appropriate the state that was yours before the world was. This is going to be our assignment for today, by the way. And if anyone has a Pool of Bethesda type vision, let me know. Know the truth of the statement, none have I lost save the son of perdition. Nothing is lost in all my holy mountain. The only thing that you lose is the belief in loss or the son of perdition. I guess belief being this son. I mean, perdition literally means loss. In other words, in this eternal body of imagination, the only thing that is lost is your belief in loss. In other words, in that eternal body, you don't believe in loss because you know everything is eternal. And for their sake I sanctify myself, that they might also be sanctified through the truth. By the way, this whole section is useful for anyone who feels that they've lost anything. Because that is just a belief you have right now. Like, let's make it super specific. Let's make it a physical object. You lost something precious to you. You absolutely believe this thing to be lost at this present moment, and that is reflected. If you would drop that and move into mentally believing this thing is yours again, it has returned to you, possibly miraculously, you would encounter it, or you would encounter an alternative version of it. I'm not going to talk about it now because I think we should do it another time when there's more about loss being discussed. But one of my first vision dreams was the nothing is lost, nothing is ever lost dream. And in the dream, I was presented with 4 different versions. Might have been 5. When I retell it, I remember properly, but it was 4 or 5 different versions of the same object. But they were all clearly different, so that when I looked at them, I knew that they were all from parallel realities in a way. And when I beheld them, when I literally laid them on my bed, I knew instinctually, without thought, that I could pick any of these objects, and I could really truly manifest any of these objects at any point in time, and any one of these objects would still retain the central ideal of the original object, because the original object is within imagination. It's not here in this experience, but I can pick a representation of it, and it's going to look a little different, but it's the same object. And I could even pick one that looks identical, has the same, deteriorations of the one that I have in this timeline. But I'll tell more of that dream later. Know the truth of the statement. We just went over that. None have I lost save the son of perdition. And for their sake I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified to the truth. There is no one to change but self. All you need to do to make men and women holy in this world is to make yourself holy. You are incapable of seeing anything that is unlovely when you establish within your own mind's eye the fact that you are lovely. That sounds pretty awesome. I mean, here Neville is averring that the mirror effect is absolute. I'm not sure it is. I think you can still include some flexibility there. Now, however, this does make things a hell of a lot easier. You're incapable of seeing anything that is unlovely when you establish within your own mind's eye the fact that you are lovely. It is far better to know this than to know anything else in the world. It takes courage, boundless courage, because many this night, after having heard this truth, will still be inclined to blame others for their predicament. Man finds it so difficult to turn to himself, to his own consciousness as the only reality. Listen to these words. No man can come to me except the Father, with which hath sent me, draw him. I and my Father are one. A man can receive nothing except it be given him from heaven. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. You did not choose me, I have chosen you. My concept of myself molds a world in harmony with itself, and draws men to tell me constantly, by their behavior, who I am. The most important thing in this world to you is your concept of self. When you dislike your environment, the circumstances of life, and the behavior of men, ask yourself, who am I? It is your answer to this question that is the cause of your dislikes. So I don't think he's going to explain this. I just want to go over and explain some of these. I lay down my life that I may take it again means that you release an old state. You die to this old state and its experiences so that you can move into a new state, a new life and its experiences. And then in time that will die, because you will uncover, there's yet a higher one. No man taketh it from me. In other words, no one else is going to get you out of these states. Nobody's going to do that for you. Even if you take a pill for depression and it cures your depression, it's still your belief in that pill that's doing it. Truly. And look, anybody who wants to come on here and try to argue with me about that, I don't care. I don't care, because you know what? If you've had success in that way, it doesn't, great. It doesn't matter to me. how you pursue it. And related to that, a lot of times your unfoldings are going to include things like that. They're going to include those kind of paths because of your current body of beliefs. So if your unfolding includes medical treatment, because that's what you currently believe in, that's what you fully established as your world, well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's really no better or worse than an instant miracle. It's just not. It's just an unfolding. And I realize how crappy that can sound, because I've had unfoldings that I hated, that I really truly hated. But I also recognize that that was my current body of belief of what was possible. That made me go through that, because I thought that was the only way. You did not choose me, I have chosen you. That doesn't just apply to people, that applies to any experiences, to any circumstances. His best explanation is of it right here in the next sentence. My concept of myself molds a world in harmony with itself. The most important thing in this world to you, we just said that one, but we'll say it again, because it is the most important thing. The most important thing in this world to you is your concept of self. When you dislike your environment, the circumstances of life, and the behavior of men, ask yourself, who am I? It is your answer to this question that is the cause of your dislikes. If you do not condemn self, there will be no man in your world to condemn you. If you don't beat up on yourself, if you are living in the consciousness of your ideal, you will see nothing to condemn. To the pure, all things are pure. Now, I would like to spend a little time making as clear as I can what I personally do when I pray, what I do when I want to bring about changes in my world. You will find it interesting, and you will find that it works. No one here can tell me they cannot do it. It is so very simple. All can do it. We are what we imagine we are. Here for technique people, here you go. Here's Neville's technique. This technique is not difficult to follow, but you must want to do it. You cannot approach it with the attitude of mind, oh well, I'll try it. You must want to do it, because the mainspring of action is desire. Desire is the mainspring of all action. Now, what do I want? I must define my objective. For example, suppose I want it now to be elsewhere. This very moment, I really desire to be elsewhere. I need not go through the door. I need not sit down. I need not do nothing but stand just where I am, and with my eyes closed, assume that I'm actually standing where I desire to be. Then I remain in this state until it has the feeling of reality. Were I now elsewhere, I could not see the world as I now see it from here. The world changes in its relationship to me as I change my position in space. So I stand right here, close my eyes, and I imagine I am seeing what I would see were I there. I remain in it long enough to feel it to be real. I cannot touch the walls of this room from here, but when you close your eyes and become still, you can imagine and feel that you touch it. You can stand where you are and imagine you are putting your hand on that wall. To prove you really are, put it there and slide it up and feel the wood. You can imagine you are doing it without getting off your seat. You can do it, and you will actually feel it if you become still and intense enough. I stand where I am now, and I allow the world that I want to see and to enter physically, to come before me as though I were there now. In other words, I bring elsewhere here by assuming that I am there. Is that clear? I let it come up. I let it come up. I do not make it come up. I simply imagine I am there and then let it happen. If I want a physical presence, I imagine he is standing there and I touch him. All through the Bible I find these suggestions. He placed his hands upon them. He touched them. If you want to comfort someone, what is the automatic feeling? To put your hand on them. You cannot resist it. You meet a friend and the hand goes out automatically. You either shake hands or put your hand on his shoulder. Suppose you were now to meet a friend that you have not seen for a year, and he is a friend of whom you are very fond. What would you do? You would embrace him, wouldn't you? Or you would put your hand upon him. In your imagination, bring him close enough to to put your hand upon him and feel him to be solidly real. Restrict the action to just that. You will be amazed at what happens. From then on, things begin to move. Your dimensionally greater self will inspire, in all, the ideas and actions necessary to bring you into physical contact. It works that way. Every day I put myself into the drowsy state. It's a very easy thing to do. But habit is a strange thing in man's world. It is not law, but habit acts as though it were the most compelling law in the world. We are creatures of habit. If you create an interval every day into which you put yourself into the drowsy state, say at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, do you know at that moment every day you will feel drowsy? You try it for 1 week and see if I am not right. You sit down for the purpose of creating a state akin to sleep, as though you were sleepy, but do not push the drowsiness too far, just far enough to relax and leave you in control of the direction of your thoughts. You try it for 1 week, and every day at that hour, no matter what you're doing, you will hardly be able to keep your eyes open. If you know the hour when you will be free, you can create it. I would not suggest that you do it lightly because you will feel very, very sleepy, and you may not want to. I have another way of praying. In this case, I always sit down, and I find the most comfortable armchair imaginable. I lie flat on my back and relax completely. Make yourself comfortable. You must not be in any position where your body is distressed. Always put yourself into a position where you have the greatest ease. That is the first stage. To know what you want is the start of the prayer. Secondly, you construct in your mind's eye one single little event which implies that you have realized your desire. I always let my mind roam on many things that could follow the answered prayer, and I single out one that is most likely to follow the fulfillment of my desire. One simple little thing, like the shaking of a hand, embracing a person, the receiving of a letter, the writing of a check, or whatever would imply the fulfillment of your desire. After you have decided on the action, which implies that your desire has been realized, already happened, then sit in your nice comfortable chair, or lie flat on your back, close your eyes, for the simple reason it helps to induce this state that borders on sleep. The minute you feel this lovely drowsy state, or the feeling of gathered togetherness, wherein you feel, I could move if I wanted to, but I do not want to. I could open my eyes if I wanted to, but I do not want to. When you get that feeling, you can be quite sure that you are in the perfect state to pray successfully. This is a long way of saying get relaxed. In this feeling, it is easy to touch anything in this world. You take the simple, little restricted action which implies fulfillment of your prayer, and you feel it or you enact it. Whatever it is, you enter into the action as though you were an actor in the part. You do not sit back and visualize yourself do it. You do it. In other words, he's emphasizing that it should be a first-person visualization. It doesn't have to be, but that's his recommendation. With the body immobilized, you imagine that the greater you inside the physical body is coming out of it and that you're actually performing the proposed action. If you're going to walk, you imagine that you're walking. Do not see yourself walk, feel that you're walking. If you're going to climb stairs, feel that you are climbing the stairs. Do not visualize yourself doing it, feel yourself doing it. If you're going to shake a man's hand, do not visualize yourself shaking his hand. Imagine your friend is standing before you and shake his hand. But leave your physical hands immobilized and imagine that your greater hand, which is your imaginary hand, is actually shaking his hand. All you need to do is to imagine that you are doing it. You are stretched out in time, and what you are doing, which seems to be a controlled daydream, is an actual act in the greater dimension of your being. You are actually encountering an event fourth dimensionally before you encounter it here in the 3 dimensions of space, and you do not have to raise a finger to bring that state to pass. My third way of praying is simply to feel thankful. If I want something, either for myself or another, I immobilize the physical body, then I produce a state akin to sleep, and in that state, just feel happy. Feel thankful, which thankfulness implies realization of what I want. I assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and with my mind dominated by this single sensation, I go to sleep. I need do nothing to make it so, because it is so. My feeling of the wish fulfilled implies it is done. All these techniques you can use and change them to fit your temperament, but I must emphasize the necessity of inducing the drowsy state where you can become attentive without effort. A single sensation dominates the mind if you pray successfully. What would I feel like now were I what I want to be? When I know what the feeling would be like, I then close my eyes and lose myself in that single sensation, and my dimensionally greater self then builds a bridge of incident to lead me from this present moment to the fulfillment of my mood. That is all you need do. But people have a habit of slighting the importance of simple things. So let's review the three that he mentioned here. I mean, the first is just simple make there here. Well, he's talking about really the importance of using feeling in an imaginal act, like touch, actual touch, including an element of touch to what you're doing. And then he talks about, picking a time every day where you're going to be drowsy at that time every day, and using that as your imaginal time, and to do the thing of having a repeated simple experience, the shaking of a hand, embracing a person, receiving of a letter, the writing of a check, whatever would imply the fulfillment of your desire. And then the thankfulness. Simply to feel thankful. And all of these he recommends in what he calls the state akin to sleep. It's just relaxation. And you don't have to close your eyes if you don't want to. There may be totally different activities that relax you. You may be somebody who likes to ride your bike every day, or you like to go fishing, or you like to take walks, you like to cook. I actually imagine quite a lot. Well, imagining all the time, but I have found that daydreaming while doing the dishes seems to be effective, but I hate the dishes. It's so weird. But I guess maybe it's my dislike of the dishes that naturally puts me in my mind and disconnects me from the exterior world. But yeah, even if it's an activity where you're still doing stuff, you can still be in a relaxed enough state to really focus into this other reality. We are creatures of habit, right here. We are creatures of habit, and we are slowly learning to relinquish our previous concepts. But the things we formerly lived by still in some way influence our behavior. Here is a story from the Bible that illustrates my point. It is recorded that Jesus told his disciples to go to the crossroads, and that there they would find a colt, a young colt not yet ridden by a man, to bring the colt to him, and if any man ask, "Why do you take this colt?" say, "The Lord has need of it." They went to the crossroads and found the colt and did exactly as they were told. They brought the unbridled ass to Jesus, and he rode it triumphantly into Jerusalem. The story has nothing to do with a man riding on a little colt. You are Jesus of the story. The colt is the mood you are going to assume. That is the living animal not yet ridden by you. What would the feeling be like were you to realize your desire? A new feeling like a young colt is a very difficult thing to ride, unless you ride him with a disciplined mind. If I do not remain faithful to the mood, the young colt throws me off. Every time you become conscious that you are not faithful to this mood, you have been thrown from the colt. Discipline your mind that you may remain faithful to a high mood, and ride it triumphantly into Jerusalem. which is fulfillment, or the city of peace. This idea of imagining for something and then as soon as you come out of it, having a million thoughts against it, that's being totally thrown from the cult into a ravine, screaming, smacking the bottom, being like, why aren't we there yet? The story precedes the feast of the Passover. If we would pass from our present state into that of our ideal, we must assume that we are already that which we desire to be and remain faithful to our assumption. For we must keep a high mood if we would walk with the highest. I'm pretty sure I have a video where I said, no, like where it was a lecture where Neville talked about his meaning of Passover, and it simply is you pass over from one state to another. A fixed attitude of mind, a feeling that it is done, will make it so. If we walk as though it were, but every once in a while I look to see if it really is, then I fall off my mood or cult. So he's talking about when you're looking to your exterior world for confirmation, eager, and really uncertain and doubtful. As you manifest more things, and things which do require a big adjustment of your concept of self, you will definitely see this pattern where when you're anxiously checking, it immediately takes you out of the state, and then you have to do something to get back in it. And that's why the best thing is just to, when the thought of that thing comes up, go into a peaceful and reassuring daydream with it. If it's related to a person, have a very nice conversation with them mentally. If you're someone that really does like affirmations and find that effective for you, have your reference affirmations ready to go. Whatever it is that would get you back into the mood as quick as possible, identify those things and implement them. If I would suspend judgment like Peter, I could walk on the water. Peter starts walking on the water, and then he begins to look unto his own understanding and begins to go down. The voice said, "Look up, Peter." Peter looks up, and he rises again and continues walking on the water. Instead of looking down to see if this thing is really going to harden into fact, you simply know that it is already so. Sustain that mood, and you will ride the unbridled colt into the city of Jerusalem. All of us must learn to ride the animal straight into Jerusalem unassisted by a man. You do not need another to help you. The strange thing is that as we keep the high mood and do not fall, others cushion the blows. They spread the palm leaves before me to cushion my journey. I do not have to be concerned. The shocks will be softened as I move into the fulfillment of my desire. My high mood awakens in others the ideas and actions which tend toward the embodiment of my mood. If you walk faithful to a high mood, there will be no opposition and no competition. Oop, it's having trouble. The test of a teacher or a teaching is to be found in the faithfulness of the taught. I am leaving here on Sunday night. Do remain faithful to this instruction. If you look for causes outside the consciousness of man, then I have not convinced you of the reality of consciousness. If you look for excuses for failure, you will always find them, for you find what you seek. If you seek an excuse for failure, you will find it in the stars and the numbers in the teacup or most any place. The excuse will not be there, but you will find it to justify your failure. I think this is really important because this is about the assumption of failure. If you are really thinking that this is not going to work, it's not going to work, and then you're also going to produce a bunch of bullshit reasons why it didn't work. That is your creation. Successful business and professional men and women know that this law works. You will not find it in gossip groups, but you will find it in courageous hearts. Man's eternal journey is for one purpose, to reveal the Father. He comes to make visible his Father, and his Father is made visible in all the lovely things of this world. All the things that are lovely, that are of good report, ride these things, and have no time for the unlovely in this world, regardless of what it is. Remain faithful to the knowledge that your consciousness, your I amness, your awareness of being aware of the only reality, It is the rock on which all phenomena can be explained. There is no explanation outside of that. I know of no clear conception of the origin of phenomena, save that consciousness is all, and all is consciousness. That which you seek is already housed within you. Were it not now within you, eternity could not evolve it. No time stretch will be long enough to evolve what is not potentially involved in you. You simply let it into being by assuming that it is already visible in your world, and remaining faithful to your assumption, it will harden into fact. Your Father has unnumbered ways of revealing your assumption. Fix this in your mind and always remember, an assumption, though false, if sustained, will harden into fact. You and your Father are one, and your Father is everything that was, is, and will be. Therefore, that which you seek, you already are. It can never be so far off as even to be near, for nearness implies separation. The great Pascal said, "You never would have sought me had you not already found me. What you now desire, you already have, and you seek it only because you have already found it. You found it in the form of desire. It is just as real in the form of desire as it is going to be to your bodily organs. You are already that which you seek, and you have no one to change but self in order to express it." All right, let's scoot back to chat time. Though for today, honestly, there won't be very much chat time because we're already getting close to 2 hours, and I really already said everything I want to say today. I think this is a really great lesson, lecture, however you want to describe it. And for anybody who is at a sort of point in familiarity where you have heard about Neville, you've maybe listened to a couple lectures, you've watched a million YouTube videos by contemporary people, and so self-concept is touted a lot, but you don't know where that comes from. Now you know. That's it. I mean, this is really the best and the main self-concept teaching. And anybody that's talking about it today, this is where it comes from. Even if they never read it, but they're just parroting other people or talking about what they've experienced personally, this is where it comes from. And this is the best source of it. Now, of course, as with all of Neville's lectures, all of his quotes are coming from other sources too. So that's just the nature of things. And the reason why that's the nature of things, because there's only one source, which is God the Father, your imagination. But yeah, I hope this will be helpful. I hope there are some really great, encouraging sentences in there. I think this is one that you should take some time to personally read and absorb and really let some of the better quotes in there really sink into you and really resonate with who you feel you are. So to close out today, we're going to do the recommended thing there, which is to spend some time in a relaxed meditation. And it doesn't have to be while you're laying down. You can do it while you're doing whatever your other relaxed activity is, but we're going to focus on the state of perfection. And not just that idea of perfection, but asking, what is the ideal state? What is the state of absolute perfection like? What would that feel like? What would that be like? What would that feel like to experience that from the perspective of this person that I think I am now? What would that be like to experience it unbounded by a character I'm currently conceiving myself to be? What's that state like? What would it be like to be it right now? So spend some time dwelling on perfection and moving into a state of perfection. See how that goes. If anybody has a Pool of Bethesda vision, please let me know. And also, you can send me an email at imaginationstream@gmail.com. And this applies to anyone, even if you're watching this months or years from now. Or, I don't know if this site will still be up in a couple years, but if it's a few months or weeks from now, I'll still have an account there. So I can now receive voice messages. They're limited to 90 seconds, but you can send multiple if you want. And I may play them on the stream, depending. If you don't want me to, say in the message you don't want me to play it. But yeah, you can send them in, and I'll reply to them on stream if I like it. But if you do have an experience like that, please send me a voice message or an email about it. Even if you don't want me to share it, I would love to hear it. And certainly, if you have a great experience and you'd like to share it, I think everybody else would really enjoy it too. Especially if you really sink into it and then come back out of it, but you have experiences later that week or something that really reflect that state that you were in. Be super interested to hear the kind of experiences people have. Okay, so I might do a stream tomorrow. I mean, I probably will, but it'll probably be at night. Just be a random Neville lecture that I feel like doing that day. Pretty soon, I don't know when it's going to come out. They didn't announce the date. Figment 2 is coming out, and this one's called Creed Valley. So presumably it's a lot about belief. I never finished the first game, but we'll play the first game again at some point. In that game, you play as imagination. So in the first game, you were called Figment, and you were literally imagination, and he had retired. And while he was retired, because he was retired, things like negative thoughts had basically taken over the mind, and so he had to become the hero again and go around the brain, restoring order in the brain by defeating all of the baddies, all of the negative baddies, the evil bad thoughts that had taken over this person's mind. So this one, I don't know if you're going to play Figment Imagination again, or if there's going to be another character. But what's really cool is, all of the characters in the game are aspects of mind, or like the locations are things in your mind that create your reality. Like when you go to the time section of the mind, everything is really extremely well organized, and there's cogs everywhere and clocks everywhere. You go to the artistic version of the mind, stuff is really colorful and beautiful, but it's kind of more meandering than it is super organized. But yeah, all right. So I'll probably see you all again tomorrow. If I don't, I'll do another stream this week before the weekend, and then do a weekend stream, probably Saturday. But thanks for tuning in. If you watch this on YouTube, thanks for checking it out. And it's this weekend I will be finishing 5 lectures. Well, we'll start on lesson 5. I don't know if I'll get through it, but we'll do, because there's a Q&A, so we're not going to finish it this week. But I'll start lesson 5 this weekend, and I guess we'll finish Q&A before the end of June at this point, because the Q&A is really, if you have any questions about manifesting, check the Q&A of 5 lessons. He probably answered your question. It was like 50 years ago now. All right, everybody, you have a great day. I will see you all again next time.